Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're suiting up with the Dark Knight in the first episode of Telltale Games Batman. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Batman, the Telltale series, was an episodic game that released in 5 episodes starting in August of 2016 and releasing monthly through December of that same year. The game received mixed reviews overall, and over the next few weeks we'll be covering each episode one by one, breaking them down and discussing the ethical and moral quandaries presented. If you're new to the Philosophy and Ethics in Games series, I tend to dig deep into the games I break down and look at them as thought experiments to link them to the real world to help us learn more about ourselves and the world around us in a new and interesting way. If that sounds like something you might enjoy, check out the other videos in the series and consider subscribing to Lost in Games as I cover a variety of media on the channel using a philosophical lens to dissect stories, characters, and fictional works in a way that you won't find anywhere else. With that out of the way, let's get into Telltale Games Batman. Right off the bat, no pun intended, I want to get something important out of the way, because while I know Batman is an incredibly popular character, I'm not a big fan of the billionaire superhero thing. Bruce Wayne has more money than he knows what to do with, and choosing to use that money to buy fancy gear, dress up like a bat, and fight crime puts him in a very gray moral area before he even gets into the streets of Gotham. The money and power he has in the city, money and power that his father earned and handed to him, would be better served to make life better for people in other ways. For instance, he could use his influence to go after the root causes of crime. There are a number of reasons a person might elect to commit crimes, and while no one solution would stop all crime, there are certain social and economic factors that can be addressed to help lower the overall crime rate. Things like earning a good education factor in, with higher educational degrees typically allowing people to earn a higher wage and lowering the chances of them committing some of the lower tier crimes that Batman goes after. Bruce Wayne could spend some of his money and influence to promote changes to local laws and try to get things like universal health care, free college tuition, and universal basic income implemented to help reduce the chances of people turning to crime when they aren't able to provide for themselves and their families in other ways. He could also lobby to get the tax laws changed and give up some of his wealth for these and other programs to help make Gotham a place that actually takes care of its citizens. The reality is that no one needs billions or even millions of dollars in wealth, and having that wealth handed down and grown over generations is part of what gets societies into the kind of trouble that Gotham is in. A large amount of the wealth within the city is concentrated at the top by families like the Waynes, who justify their massive coffers by forming charities that allow them to collect money from other people and write off donations on their taxes to pretend they are doing good. But while those charities can be helpful, they are only a band-aid and actually wind up doing more harm in the long run because the actual root causes of the problems are never addressed. If people had a more stable environment where they could reliably make enough money to pay their bills and take care of their families, without needing to worry that an incident like losing their job or getting sick was going to bring their lives tumbling down in an instant, the city and the world in general would be better off. But all of that is without even getting into the story of the game. The opening bit centers on Batman taking out some criminals that are trying to steal something from the mayor's office, or at least what I presume is the mayor's office since they are at City Hall. And in the end, he winds up coming face to face with Catwoman, who was able to get some kind of hard drive out of the mayor's safe as she was working either alongside or maybe in tandem with the first group of bad guys. It's honestly not really clear this early on who is working for or with who and who is an enemy. Things will likely clear up as we go along. At the same time, or at least on the same night, Bruce Wayne is hosting a political fundraiser for Harvey Dent. Dent is running for mayor, trying to replace the current, apparently corrupt guy who holds the office. And while holding a fundraiser might kind of fall in line with the opening section where we talked about using your power to help improve society, it doesn't really go far enough. Dent is only close to Bruce Wayne because he wants the wealthier man's influence and money in the campaign. And the people attending the political fundraiser are friends of Bruce's who will eventually want something in return for their contribution. Some of those donors might be fine with some of the more socially helpful ideas I mentioned, but there are also those who would rather see laws passed to do things like hand out longer prison sentences, rather than try to disincentivize criminal activity in the first place. They would argue that they don't want their tax money going to programs that help lift people up because they don't realize how programs like universal basic income, universal healthcare, free college tuition, and higher minimum wages improve society and make it safer for everyone. Many of them, in fact, don't go into the poorer areas if they don't have to, and spend their time hiding behind walls and security systems that protect their generational wealth from the common riffraff. And that distance allows men like Carmine Falcone to step in and make things even worse for the city overall. Falcone is known generally as one of the biggest crime bosses in the city, though no one has ever been able to pin enough evidence on him to take him down. He's got his hands in just about every aspect of Gotham, and was able to get the power he wields thanks to the poverty and crime that has become such a focus of the Dent campaign. He shows up, uninvited, to the fundraiser, and makes a scene as he tries to buddy up to Bruce Wayne, and to be completely honest, the best thing Bruce can do here is play along with Falcone. As Batman, he needs to have as much information as possible about the criminal element that he is so keen on tracking down and eliminating. And if one of the most notorious men in the city is going to show up at Wayne Manor and offer himself up, Bruce might as well take the bait. The thing about men like Falcone is that they often think they are untouchable, making them extremely vulnerable to those who are smart enough to play along. This hubris works out for them for a while, as they are generally able to fool enough people to get along well, and those who can't be fooled can be typically feared into submission. But eventually, their pride and overwhelming sense of invincibility catches up to them and they fall. Now, shaking hands with Falcone will give Bruce some bad publicity in the short term, but you have to pick your battles when it comes to these kind of things. If you know the person you're dealing with is corrupt, and you don't have the immediate ability to take them down, going along and letting them think that you are on their side can often work out for the best in the long run. For Bruce, that means that even though, according to the game, his guests will remember him shaking hands with the crime boss, that one action could wind up paying off when he finally gets the chance to take Falcone down. But going along with him doesn't mean capitulating to him, and there is at least one action that I took during the private chat that the two of them had to show that while Bruce is willing to work with him, he isn't a pushover. At the very beginning of the conversation, Falcone picks up a pool stick and tosses the chalk to Bruce, telling him to chalk the stick for him. This is a test to see just how far under his boot Falcone can stick Bruce before getting pushback. Is the younger man going to be a spineless sycophant, or does he have some scruples? This is something that is just as important in real life as it is in the world of the game. Sometimes you find yourself in a position where you have to work with someone you don't particularly care for. Maybe it's a coworker, or even a manager that you don't get along with, or someone who thinks they are above everyone else even when they're not. In these kind of situations, you have to pick your battles and show that you're willing to work together while also not being a pushover who they can take advantage of. Giving in to every little whim will mean that they likely see you as someone they can walk all over, but being too assertive can lead to a lot more friction than is necessary in a given situation. Finding the right balance and knowing where you draw your own lines is important, and being willing to act when those lines are crossed is pivotal. In the case of Bruce, shaking hands in public and talking in private is alright, but being ordered around and told to do something as simple as chalking Falcone's pool stick is too far. Falcone might not like the attitude, but he'll respect Bruce a lot more in the long run knowing where the line is. After the party ends, Bruce heads down into the Batcave to collect his thoughts and get some work done. He needs to decrypt the drive he took from Catwoman, though I do have to question the ethicality of hanging onto the drive rather than returning it to the person it was stolen from in the first place. On the one hand, it is stolen property, and Bruce would be listed as an accomplice in even the most generous criminal trials for taking stolen property. It could even be argued that he was the one the property was ultimately destined for, with the whole battle on the rooftop between him and Catwoman being staged to throw off the authorities. Now, we know that isn't true, but would it really be hard to convince a jury of his peers of that? On the other hand, the drive belonged to the corrupt mayor and could have some evidence on it that he is keeping from prosecutors in order to protect himself or someone else who is involved in illicit activities. If the things being covered up are bringing harm to the people of Gotham and actively making life worse, keeping the drive and decrypting it to find out what is on it could be the morally right thing to do. Realistically, this line of reasoning falls apart because it could be used to justify stealing anything from a hard drive to a business ledger. And this is a lesson in why laws are sometimes better than morality and ethics. In the real world, even though our justice system isn't always perfect and leaves a lot of room for improvement, people are generally considered innocent until proven guilty. This is meant to protect the innocent from being persecuted by authorities for vindictive reasons and helps maintain the integrity of evidence collected in a criminal case. If someone like Bruce Wayne, for instance, could just break into a private residence or business and steal whatever they deem as evidence of wrongdoing, what's to stop them from saying they collected it in that manner, even when they just made it up? And what would prevent authorities from hiring people to do just that? We find out later on in the episode that the hard drive contains a bunch of information that ties Falcone to various criminal networks and activities, meaning in theory it could be used to bring him down for good. The problem is that now it is worthless as evidence, at least on its own. Because of how it was stolen, it could have been tampered with and files could have been added by anyone, especially someone with the knowledge of tech and resources that Bruce Wayne has at his disposal. Any good defense lawyer would have it thrown out as evidence in a heartbeat because of that fact alone, even if they didn't know that Wayne had touched it. The best the authorities would be able to do is use it to narrow any investigations they were conducting into Falcone to a specific area where they would be able to then collect actual evidence of his wrongdoing under more legal processes. If you think that doesn't sound fair, imagine the following scenario. You get pulled over by a police officer for speeding or some other traffic offense, and for one reason or another, he doesn't like the way you interacted with him. The city's police force is corrupt, known for taking bribes and being involved in various other illicit activities, and because the officer didn't like how you acted, he decides to write you a ticket and notes your name. Then, to make matters worse, someone breaks into your house the next day and steals a bunch of stuff, including your computer. That person is caught, but they say they found a hard drive in your house containing information tying you to an illegal gambling ring, and now you're facing other criminal charges to go along with the ticket that you got the day before. You find out later that the person who broke into your house was good friends with the officer that pulled you over, and you managed to figure out you're being set up, but it's too late. The hard drive is used to put you behind bars for years, and you lose everything you had all because one guy didn't like you. This might just be a hypothetical, but in a world where evidence doesn't need to follow a very specific chain of custody and process, it could easily happen to anyone. That's not to say corruption doesn't still happen, or that everyone convicted of a crime, even under the current system, is actually guilty, but it does highlight the importance of making sure things are done in a specific way to protect people who don't deserve to be locked up. And that brings us kind of back around to the problems with Batman and vigilante justice in general. Sure, in the world of comic books, movies, TV shows, and games, it makes sense that there would be heroes to fight some of the more powerful bad guys. The police or military might not be equipped to help out when it comes to fighting magic or superpowers. But in the world of Batman, or at least in Gotham, those kind of bad guys aren't really as common. There are some to be sure, but from what we've seen so far in the game, the majority of the issues they face are from organized crime and just general rampant anarchy in the streets. These are some very real-world kinds of issues, and when you start having vigilante justice as opposed to a system of laws and law enforcement, you might as well just throw out the entire system and start over. Bruce Wayne acts as judge, jury, and executioner as he plays detective and dresses up, and I can totally understand the police wanting to arrest him at every opportunity. To be fair, Gotham is kind of lawless and is being run by corruption and greed, but again, if that is the case, you'd be better off just wiping the slate clean and starting from scratch. There are two more things I want to talk briefly about to round out the episode. The first is regarding Bruce's past, as the tickets from the show his mother and father attended just before being killed come up a couple of times. They are there to act as a reminder, but they are more like baggage that is weighing him down, and the truth is that he needs to get therapy. We've talked about that a bit in the more post-apocalyptic games that I've covered, but in this instance, he doesn't have the barrier of being in a world where society has fallen. Bruce went through a traumatic event, watching his parents get shot right in front of him, and then being tossed more or less into the foster care system, though he was much luckier than most as he had Alfred to take custody and watch over him as he grew up. Losing your parents when you're young is an incredibly difficult thing to go through, but people who get the proper assistance to help them deal with that loss in the long run don't have as many problems as Bruce has as adults. He still relives the night in his dreams, with a kind of flashback at one point in the episode showing how he kind of regresses to his childlike self when remembering what happened. It's a problem that isn't limited to Bruce though, as his parents are brought up several times by several other people as the city of Gotham lives perpetually in the past. Everyone talks incessantly about how good things used to be, and how they wish they could go back to Gotham's golden days, with most of that being thought of as before the Waynes were murdered. Narratively, this is meant to show how important the Waynes were in Gotham, but it's just insane how the whole city seemed to go downhill at the same time that Bruce's life changed forever, and the idea that an entire city would rise and fall based on the life of one person is a bit much to accept. Bruce needs to grow up and get some therapy and talk through his feelings so he can move on with his life and be happy. He needs to stop being Batman and start focusing on being Bruce Wayne so he can maybe actually help improve life for people in the city through more productive means. I'm starting to sound a little bit like Alfred. The other big thing that I want to talk about is the big final choice of the episode, where Bruce can either give the evidence he stole to the police or to the media. On one side, he has Jim Gordon on the police force, who seems trustworthy but is also surrounded by corruption. The evidence could maybe be used to help build some kind of case if it doesn't get buried or destroyed. The other choice is to hand it to Vicky Vale, the intrepid reporter who somehow managed to weasel her way into the political fundraiser at the beginning of the episode. She seems like someone who could figure out the best way to make all of the info public, keeping it from being lost. But there's also a risk that she'd be taking on, as she's certainly become the target of Falcone and his goons for airing their dirty laundry. Given the circumstances, I chose to give the data to Vicky, mainly because I think she can handle herself and would only release it if she felt safe or confident in doing so. It's also one of those things where she could use anonymous sources to put it out there, giving the police an easier time, as they would then be able to open an investigation based on reports in the media rather than illegally collected evidence. Those investigations could then potentially yield evidence that wasn't considered corrupt without tainting future juries in the process. This isn't an uncommon thing, as we've seen it plenty of times in the real world. An investigative journalist uncovers something that winds up in the news, and officials open an investigation to determine the validity of the reports. Sometimes things pan out and people wind up going to jail. Sometimes the evidence doesn't corroborate the reports and the story dies. In the case of Falcone and the report from Vicky Vale, it isn't immediately clear what the outcome will be. The final few minutes of the episode include one of the coolest car transformations of all time and a fight with some of Falcone's men before we have the chance to make one final decision about how to handle Falcone. Falcone tries really hard to kill Batman before a hole is blown in the side of his tower, and we get an audience in the form of a news helicopter. We have to choose to either brutalize Falcone or arrest him, and this one is kind of an obvious decision to make. There is a time and a place for brutalizing certain bad guys, as some of them could be seen as having it coming. But that time is not in front of a news helicopter. Batman needs a certain public image to make his whole shtick work. And while rumors of more brutal behavior are fine, confirmation of it would only galvanize the police's case to stop him in the public eye and turn people against him when, for all his faults, he isn't really a bad guy. Though his family might not be as innocent as he likes to think. The Wayne family came under public scrutiny in the episode, and the last thing Falcone tells Batman in the end is that the Waynes are, or were, the biggest gangsters in Gotham. The truth of his allegations will have to wait for future episodes, however, because the credits roll just as that bomb is dropped. To make sure you don't miss out on what happens next, as well as breakdowns of other games in the future, make sure you're subscribed to Lost in Games on YouTube. I release new episodes of Philosophy and Ethics in Games every Thursday, and have other series like Friend or Foe and Unscripted on the channel, where we break down characters and rewrite stories. So check those out if you want more content like this. For those who want to go above and beyond and help me eventually afford a car that transforms into a Batmobile, I've also got channel memberships, a Patreon, and a membership program on my website. Chipping in a couple of dollars a month helps me keep making videos like this one while getting you cool perks like having your name on the screen and early access to videos. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.